So I'd like to thank you for joining me today. I'm glad we could get something to work out. I'm excited to have you on.
My
Uh,
pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. And so for the first part, can you please explain a little bit about yourself for those who don't know who you are?
Yeah, my name is Alex Benoit. I am an actor, artist in the New York City area right now. I grew up in Chicago, but I, through the means of my journey, have gone through London. I was in LA for a little bit, and now I'm in New York City. I was a figure skater for a long time. I was on Team USA, and now I've gotten to life has made it a possibility for me to do the thing that I love now.
That's awesome. And so before we get into the acting side of thing, as you mentioned, you were a figure skater. So what got you into ice skating and that type of uh,
Yeah, my mom had been a figure skater back in the 80s. She was on Team USA as well. And she was an ice dancer, which is what I ended up doing in the last part of my career. But yeah, I was the youngest child. I've got two older brothers, and the constant for me has been that I always would see my older brothers doing things, and I would say I have to do that too. And so, when I was like 3 or 4, I started hockey, and I had seen my oldest brother playing hockey, and so I said I got to play hockey. And I'm Canadian on my mom's side. My dad's side is French Canadian, but uh, they don't have as many people still in Canada. Whereas on my mom's side, pretty much everyone except for her immediate family are still up in Canada. But being Canadian, lots of people on the ice. My grandfather grew up, they homesteaded in super rural Saskatchewan. And so he grew up playing pond hockey with Gordie Howe, who's one of the greatest NHL players of all time, played for the Red Wings. But they were neighbors. Like he had a farm, you know, 10 miles down the road, which was a neighbor at that point. And they would play hockey on the pond outside in the winter. And so, yeah, and then my grandmother on that side is from Toronto, but lots of Canadians really enjoy winter sports. And so naturally, my mom had, my uncles played hockey, my mom and my aunt figure skated, and I was initially playing hockey. And I remember when I was like 7 years old, I believe it was like 2002, 2003 ish. I saw my mom. She was a judge after she retired. She was a national judge, and I watched her judging the national championships on TV. And I remember saying, "Well, that looks like an easy way to get on TV." Which first it was not worth noting, but I think kind of the writing on the wall that I didn't realize at the time was that I wanted to be performing. Which it took me a while to navigate my journey and get there. But yeah, that was my way onto the ice.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so speaking of theater, what moment did you realize that you wanted to be a performer and wanted to pursue an acting career?
So I, again, like I said, was the youngest brother, and so the first moment I think that I experienced that style of performance would be when the middle brother, not my oldest one, but the one who is next in line, um, he wasn't doing quite as many activities when we were younger. He was very interested in um, like technological things. He loved cars and trains and planes and all that. But they wanted to get him doing a group activity, and so my parents brought him to audition for a youth choir. And I'm the youngest, so I'm not in school. I tag along. The youth choir director sees another young boy who seems pretty willing to perform, and so that was my way into that. And so I started in this youth choir, and that was probably around the time I started skating, maybe a little before, so like 6 or 7 years old. And yeah, then I started skating, and then after that, I started doing things to supplement my skating. Around the time I was 10 or so, I started taking ballet and jazz and modern dance and eventually ballroom. And so I start seeing more sides of this performance. Um, and then that School of Performing Arts I was taking those dance classes at was my route into true musical theater after that, because they had a summer camp that was called Camp Summer Stock, and they would do uh, every summer these shows where basically they would the incredible group of directors and choreographers that put the camp on, who helped inspire me so much. They would create a new musical where they would take like famous songs, from the whole you know breadth of musical theater, whether it was Gilbert and Sullivan, or at this point in like 2005, you think about all the things that were coming out in the early 2000s, and those could be, they would pick and choose little like songs from those and then build a show around it. And they were fun. They were little like 45 minute to hour long uh, musicals that would have fully original story and text, but classic to new musical theater songs. And that was my first time doing something similar to what I do now. And I remember just loving it. It was the first time I got to like perform, versus singing in a choir where I was like trying to blend in, and, it was all about the music, which I loved, but I wasn't getting to really like play. And yeah, I loved it. And it started to become something that I did each summer. And then eventually I was in, middle school, and I started doing the musical at junior high, and then I did the musicals in high school. But it was always on the side. It was always my hobby, versus skating was the thing I focused on. And it wasn't until quite a bit later when I got to shift that. But yeah, that was my entry into performing arts on stage.
Yeah, that's so special. And so, your most recent big job was The Notebook. And so, what was your first experience with The Notebook, the musical?
So I became a part of the team way back in Chicago. I My cat is attacking my computer screen. Sorry about that. Um, I I was at grad school, so I left my undergraduate early because I started working professionally in Chicago. And I said, I'm going to school to work, and I'm getting these tremendous opportunities to work. I'll work. And so I leave my undergrad, and about a year and a half of great work. I was loving it, but I realized I wanted more. I wanted to really understand the art of this, and take myself to the next level. And so I auditioned for my like dream program in London for a master's, because I found a loophole that meant that even without my undergraduate, I could get my master's. And so I auditioned for it. I didn't think I was going to get in. And so I booked out another like year in Chicago, find out I did get in, have to figure out dropping those contracts, and like figuring out my way out of those so that I could go. I get back end of 2020, and our showcase gets moved because of COVID to 2021, into like fall of 21. And in September, well, August of 21, I get a self tape for The Notebook. And it was like 16 pages of material. And I remember hearing the music for the first time and just like seeing it. It's like because you get an audition, especially for a new piece, and you're like, I've heard of The Notebook. I had seen the movie and stuff. I hadn't read the book at the time, but I had seen the movie and I enjoyed it. But you don't know what a musical of The Notebook is going to look like. And yeah, reading the script and seeing the scenes that I had and the music that I had, I was like, oh, this is something I really want to be a part of. And so I do my self tape, and I thought it went well. And at this time, I was in for they were only doing the covers, and I was in for the Young Noah cover. And so I was singing sadness and joy, and I was singing, all that good stuff. And I was like, okay, I feel good about my audition. And then I hear nothing for like a month. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I didn't book that. And then suddenly I get called in for a callback, and it was a Friday night. And I remember going in, and I had a list of the people who were going to be in the room, but I was kind of just focusing on getting my material. And so this was a moment where I hadn't really prepared enough in that I didn't know who all the people were, but I'm actually glad I didn't because I got in there and, all these incredible people, Becca Brunstetter and Michael Greif, Shelley Williams. You've got Jeff Coe, Carmel Dean, and you've got Kurt Deutsch and Kevin McCollum, these greats of musical theater in America. And I'm like talking to Michael and I'm like, oh, this guy's nice. I think he works at Chicago Shakespeare. Like, I don't know who he is. But it was good because I was totally at ease. I was like, I got to talk about my life and skating and my journey to where I was and how I'd just fallen in love with my wife and in grad school. And I could just talk and be myself. Um, but yeah, I do my audition. Also, mind you, it was COVID. And so I take my mask off. And at the time, I had a mustache. And so young Noah is like 17, 18,
Yeah.
and I had a full mustache. And so they literally did not recognize me. They're like, they called me another name. I'm like, no, I'm Alex. And I'm like, you're Alex? Oh, you don't look like your headshot. I'm like, I know. I'm sorry. I think that I was, because I've done a lot of commercials for a company called WeatherTech, which is based in Illinois. And so if anyone's seen WeatherTech Alex, that's where it's from. But they wanted me to have like a goatee, and at the time I could grow the goatee quick, but not the mustache part. And so I was keeping the mustache because I was on hold. I was there. At this point I've done, I think 11 commercials for them, but at the time I'd done like 3 or 4, and they were going to bring me in to shoot another 2. And so I wasn't sure when it was going to happen. So I had the mustache and I'm like, I'm sorry, it's here. But it's a Friday night at like 8:30 ish. I finish at like 9. I was in for a while. I was like, that went really well. Okay. At like 10 o'clock, I get a call from casting saying, hey, they want to see you tomorrow morning at like 10 to do middle Noah. And they gave me like 7 pages, no new music, but 7 new pages of text. I'm like, okay, I guess I've got like an hour to memorize this before I go to bed. So I cram all the pages, go to bed, wake up, and I go in. I do it. We do the songs, and I'm like, oh, that went well. And Ingrid was the person who wasn't there on Friday night, and I'm like, she's the one who I would have like immediately recognized because I had a playlist of her music on my YouTube in like 7th grade. It was like I loved her stuff, and so I would have recognized her and freaked out a little. And so I come in Saturday morning, do my thing, finish singing a song, and Michael, who I now know is Michael Greif, and I'm like, okay, this is a little weird, but because I saw him yesterday, I'm not freaking out. If there had been like time in between, I probably would have. But he like turns to his left, and they always film your auditions like nowadays for
Hmm.
other
Yeah.
people to see later. But he turns, and I didn't realize it was a live stream. He's like, "Hey Ingrid, what did you think of that?" And I'm like, I just sang for Ingrid Michaelson, and it was a song she wrote. Oh my god! Um, and so that was crazy. But she was so sweet, and just is so talented, and yeah, so that happens, and sometimes you wait like a couple weeks, a month before you hear anything. Luckily, in this case, it was like a couple days, and I got a message through my agent that casting was like, okay, we're gonna be giving him an offer, and then you wait for the offer to actually come in, and yeah, but yeah, that was my beginning of my journey with the Notebook, and then like a month later is when I had my showcase for my grad program. So I had literally just found out about the Notebook. I was reading the novel on the flight, and while I was waiting to like go out and perform in the theater we were in New York, and then when we were in LA.
That's so special. That's a great journey. And so, what was it like finding out that you were going to be going with the cast to New York?
Yeah, it was. So with a show like this, you hope for the best. We finished our run in Chicago and it went incredible. And I was like, once we started putting the show on its feet, I'm like, this is really special. Like I had already had my moment where I was like, I need to be a part of this. But then you see it actually like grow in front of you. And I was like, this is something special. Like, this is a great show. And you do the run, and at the end of a run, and I had never been a part of a pre-Broadway cast, and so, the producers and folks are like, yeah, like we're working to get you guys to New York. And in my head, I'm like, that's crazy. Like, that's wild. But you also are like, are they just being nice to me? Like, I don't know. Like, you don't know. Like, would they really tell you, like, it's not going to happen? Like, I don't know. And then you just wait. And it's agonizing, like our run was initially supposed to be in spring of 22. Because of COVID, it got moved to fall of 22. And then I didn't hear anything for a year. Nothing. And it's like, who knows what's going to happen? And like, it had kind of been phrased like they were going to try and move quick, and then they didn't. And then Johnny Beasley, who played older Noah in Chicago, passed away, which was very, very sad. Loved Johnny Beasley. The work that he did was magnificent, and he was a magnificent person. But when he passed, that's also like, okay, what happens now? And yeah, I heard nothing. And then like eventually summer of 23 comes around, and I see like, I wake up one day and I see a notification on like Facebook that, the Notebook musical has announced they're moving to Broadway. And I'm like, both excited and also, I've never done this. And so I'm like, does that mean I'm not doing it? I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
now I'm in the weirder spot of like, what's even happening with this?
Yeah.
And like you talk to your agents and, they're like, hang tight, like, let's see what happens. And about a month or two later is when I finally got my offer. And yeah, I mean, you don't know because like a lot of folks didn't transfer with the show. That happens for any number of reasons. And so I was just hoping and hoping and hoping. And eventually I got that call, and it was incredible. I remember exactly where I was and, what was happening. At the time we had found a cat, and a senior cat that was literally dying on the sidewalk in the heat. It was like a stray cat that was in very rough shape that we took in and ended up kind of like hospice fostering him for the last week to give him a comfortable last week because we weren't sure how old he was. We took him off the ground and took him to a vet to try and get him help because he clearly was dying, and went through that whole thing. But it was that week, and so literally like it was wild that I had these crazy highs and lows of like, oh my gosh, this cat is dying, we need to save him. Okay, are we going to try and we're going to try and save him? Oh, we found out he's very old and it probably isn't going to be a long time, but we want to give him a comfortable time. And so like high low, and then it's like we're going to give him comfort, and then finding out about the Notebook was great. And then like the next day is when poor guy, we had named him Porter because we found him in an area that was really well known for trains in Chicago. And they had these Pullman cars, and there would be porters on the train. And so we named him Porter. And the next day he passed away, which was really sad, but it was just all these highs and lows.
Yeah.
But yeah, found that out. And then it wasn't until a couple months later when we were like, I would fly up to New York in the morning and fly back in the evening to try and find an apartment. And then like there was a party that like a get together where the cast was getting to meet each other before rehearsals and stuff. And so I went to that, and these crazy days. And it wasn't until even like, I think it was 2 weeks before we started rehearsal, something like that, that I even found out that I was the dance captain. Like
Oh,
they
wow.
had asked me if I wanted to be dance captain, and then you just wait and you don't know what's going to happen. And And yeah, and I'd never dance captain before, which was also crazy. But but yeah, it was a wild process, and now I feel better knowing a little more about what happens, but I'm also sure that it's never the same twice. Um, but yeah, it was a wild time transfer first getting into the show, booking the show and then transferring with it, and then, getting to enjoy an unbelievable run, of a year. We were together for a year in New York from rehearsals to closing, which is more than a lot of shows get now. Feel very fortunate for that. Really got to like explore the piece and grow with it. But yeah,
Yeah, that's such a special whirlwind of events that led up to something amazing. And so, just following your acting, what is the best piece of advice you've received from another actor?
the best piece of advice that I have received from another actor is, I mean, I think that it's hard to pick a single best piece of advice, I think, but some highlights, I think, are to lead with kindness. I think a lot of the actors I look up to will say, we do our work and that's great, but more important than anything is being a good person. So enter a room with kindness. We're trying to build a better place for ourselves as actors and as people. Um, Another great piece of advice I received from a mentor of mine in London was just, and it has been repeated by several mentors here as well, is we get the tremendous opportunity as artists to be sponge, to learn and grow from everything, um, absorb knowledge, be excited by discovery and curiosity. Um, and that can be a part of every piece of our life, I think,
Yeah.
going out for a walk, look at the trees, the way that it's crazy when you think about the way that trees grow and the way that their roots commingle. And that kind of tells us something about how humans connect, in the same way. So that's trees, go for a drive and you see the way that people drive on the road and they're all living their own lives.
Yeah.
That teaches you something. The way that someone walks through a grocery store, the way that you communicate this conversation we're having, it's incredible. Not only the conversation we get to have, but also when you think about the fact that we get to have this over a computer,
Yeah.
half a country apart, and yet we're connecting on a deeper level about something that gives our lives joy, you know, performing arts. This is something beautiful that we get to share, that we get to think about as artists. And now we get to learn about each other and the way that the world is by talking about it. And so every moment in your life can be an opportunity to learn and to grow and to gain both a cultural and a personal expansion upon what it means to be a human, you know?
For sure. That's really beautiful. And so, what is if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to your younger self?
If I was to give advice to my younger self, I would say to enjoy every second because I think it's really easy to get locked into the the rhythm of life, and the speed with which we assume things need to happen. Like, I just need to get through this test next week because then I'll be better, or I need to get through the end of the school year, or I need to get through, you know, uh, this show that I'm doing because I'm stressed about getting the lines. And every second is the journey, and the journey is a beautiful thing. And so enjoy it while it happens because the older that you get, the quicker life moves, and you will long for the nostalgic moments and all the moments that you could have learned from and enjoyed and really taken to the fullest once you've passed them. And that's not to say you should live in the past because that's the beauty of life is that we are always in those moments. But if I had to give a piece of advice to my younger self, I would say just enjoy them as they happen. if I had a piece of advice from my younger self, I would say don't worry so much about where you are. I think that was something I was better about as a kid. Is I think I let myself kind of go with the flow a little more. I think that a lot of times we learn habits. I mean, like physically, so many people nowadays have neck pain from how much we look at our phones, right? And I'm guilty of that. I'm fully, but that's a learned thing. When we are born, we don't have that issue because we don't look at phones. That's a learned thing. Um, and I think that that same mentality can be seen in a lot of different pieces of our lives. And I think for me, one of them is just I have learned to spend so much time worrying about making sure that I'm in the right place at the right time, or, making sure I'm doing the right thing for my career to go somewhere, or doing the right thing for, you know, a piece that if I'm in a show, like I have to hit this moment in a show, otherwise I won't springboard into this next beat. And I think that the most beautiful moments in life are when we allow serendipitous manifestation. Everything's going to be okay. And you can just let life kind of take the wheel a little bit. And that doesn't mean that you don't care. It just means that you trust the universe and yourself and the people that you've surrounded yourself with. So I think that's a piece of advice my younger self would have given me now that I could take.
That's really great. And so that actually wraps up our interview today. I'd like to thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Yeah, my pleasure.